one of the things you say, Sudhir, in your book, of course, is that, I mean, for all of HUL's strengths, it's also the opposite of a startup in the sense that it can often be stodgy, it can often be hierarchical, and you have some very funny examples. I wonder whether you want to tell the audience about that carpet and the special offices that are...
Yeah, I think HUL is a conservative company, but it's just one step more conservative than the mores of the day. So it also progresses, but I would still say on the scale of things, it is more conservative than, let's say, the median company in India. And you know, when I joined HUL, in fact, I was a summer trainee working for Gopal, and I remember, you know, hanging around there, and there was a rule which was a carpet rule, which is you had to be a certain grade in the company to get a carpet in your room. Now, you know, what happened is when the company became bigger and people started sharing rooms, so often you would have a senior guy and slightly junior guy sharing a room. And there would be a carpet, and someone would come and cut the carpet, and the guy who was more senior would get the carpet and the other guy wouldn't. And you could only be served tea if you were a certain grade. So again, in the same room, I remember, I think Hemant and Amin were sitting in the same room, and the guy who'd serve tea would only serve tea with a certain grade, otherwise you go and get your own tea. So he would come there, and then, you know, Amin would ask Hemant, why don't you pour me a cup of tea? And then the bearer would pair it. So, you know, I mean, thankfully both the rules have changed.
Remember, so there was this, if you were grade 3 or above, you got a steel tray with a brown thermos flask of water and 2 glasses. And if you're below that grade, you didn't get it.
On the first floor
and a towel, and a white towel.
On the first floor of Hindustan Lever House, where I worked for about almost 8 years in personal products, the bathroom had napkins for a certain seniority and above. And so all our junior brand managers, all of us would land up there, go for a pee, and use those napkins. But it was still numbered and named, but you didn't have a napkin for yourself.
I'm editing a book at the moment about Narayan Murthy and Sudhamurthy, and there's an amazing story about Narayan Murthy in it, which is he applied for a job at HUL as on the tech side, and he got it. And while he went for his job interview, he was applying for quite a senior position. So when he went for his loo break, they pointed him to a special bathroom, which was for covenanted officers. I'm not quite sure what that means. But anyway.
Covenanted is grade 3 and above.
Grade 3. And so he was like, what do you mean? And he's like, no, there are different bathrooms. And he got offered the job, and he decided not to take it. Because he said to the HR guy, he said, you shouldn't be having separate bathrooms. Now, these are all funny stories, but of course there's something serious underneath it. Is this kind of hierarchy, I mean, we're talking about an extraordinary company that has lasted, that has depth, that has given employees tremendous value, extraordinary training. And at the same time, it's kind of really hierarchical. It's quite set in its ways. Is that a problem? Or is that actually, in a funny way, the opposite side of its strength? Like you kind of, it's like that one person who has like a strength, and this is sort of the shadow side. I mean, how do you feel? How do you reconcile it?
No, I mean, I reconcile it, and I tell you, it is a relatively stodgy company. So it's, you know, the things that we spoke about don't happen now, but I would still say it's stodgier than other companies similar. But one of the big strengths of this slight kind of stodginess is Levers doesn't pronounce heroes and villains too fast. So, which is, I think, it's a pretty good quality. And you know, surprisingly, what happens, Chiki, and I must tell you that the flip side of this is because it doesn't pronounce heroes and villains too fast, and people get promoted after a certain period of time, you have to broadly spend 10 years before you kind of really, you know, get somewhere in Levers, right? Paradoxically, what it does is it allows for blossoming of mavericks. And one of the interesting things when I read the book was you can sort of pinpoint success points of Levers quite clearly in SharePoint and so on. And people associate those periods with mavericks. They're not necessarily, in fact, not necessarily, they never become the chairman of the company. They always, but they get to pretty senior levels. And the reason is that in early careers, if you start judging people, mavericks can get, you know, pushed out of a system. And because by the time it's 10 years and these mavericks then have certain amount of power in their hands and certain amount of ability to do things, that they're able to do magic. So paradoxically, for all its hierarchy, if you really dig deep down into Levers, you find, compared to both multinational Indian companies, lots of stories about mavericks who did things that, you know, others didn't, and sort of entrepreneurs. So it is actually the flip side of being solid and hierarchical, and, you know, is this. And it's a kind of slightly deepish point on Levers.
But Sanjeev, I mean, as someone who understands startups, I mean, how do you feel about these qualities?
So look, I think a certain amount of grounding into systems, processes, getting the business basics right is really important. So just let me know something. So Hitesh Oberoi joined us in early 2000, right, from Lever. I wouldn't say he spent 10 years there, he spent 4 years there. Okay, so some orientation there. He became CEO of the company when I stepped aside in 2010. In the last 10 years, I think we have given our shareholders a return of 28.6% per annum CAGR over 10 years, which puts us in the top 10 companies in India who had over 2,000 crore market cap 10 years ago. Now, I won't say he's done it alone, okay, but he's led the company. Okay, so these are results. So it does work in a startup also. It can work. I'm not saying it always does, but it can be made to work.
And you don't see, Gopal, I mean, you thrived in HUL and of course you led Airtel. That hierarchical quality in no way sort of, you didn't feel like it stamped out your talents or held you back in any way. Are those qualities, some of those qualities, things you'd actually want to import into Airtel?
I think growing up in HUL, it was a hierarchical culture, and sometimes I did find it suffocating. But if you look at HUL, the HUL I left and the HUL I worked in between 2008 and 12, I don't think was as hierarchical at all. It was much flatter, much more agile. But one of the things that you must see is that HUL operates in categories that are a little bit more slow-moving, in the sense that they have longer cycles of innovation. Things don't change in a hurry. And so I think you need a lot more rigor and depth to really understand and make an impact. And I think it works for that kind of a business model. In certain other businesses, in certain other areas, like in telecom today, I think you need to move a little faster. And frankly, you know, people don't have the time for hierarchy, because then you lose some of the best young talent that comes to you. So I think it's got to be horses for courses. It's just that HUL has a peer group that where you attract talent from really good institutes, really high quality talent, and they get used to a certain way of operating, and it becomes the accepted standard. But there are many upsides: the rigor, the understanding of customers, the fact that you're put in these different situations. I think that really makes people grow as well.